I don't know, but I'll call you when I get back. Just to,
Okay.
okay. Thank you. I will. Thank you.
And good morning.
Sorry, good morning.
Oh, no problem whatsoever. Thank you for being here on this dreary day. This is a talk about 1939. It was Israeli Holocaust Remembrance Day about 2 weeks ago, and today is also the anniversary, if the Russians are absolutely right, of Hitler killing himself 78 years ago today on April 30th. But Europe goes to war. 1939 is a rather interesting year in terms of there are 4 wars going on. There is Hitler. The German Bund, the Nazi group, rallied at Madison Square Garden. Father Coughlin was spreading the big myth, the big lie on radio back in 1939. Spanish Civil War ends. The Winter War between the Soviets and the Finns begin. Another Middle East failure. The Brits tried to get some sort of peace between the Arabs and Jews, and they failed miserably. Albert Einstein is talking about how the Germans may have enough material to produce an atomic bomb. Any of you go to the 1939 World's Fair?
We weren't born yet.
You weren't born yet. It's kind of interesting in that some of the people who I've spoken to over the last month, because I've done this virtually all month, did tell me about having a great time as a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old at the fair. One woman told me it was the introduction of electric doors, and that all she did was walk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until her mother said, "Enough. We spend money to see the other things." But that was her story at the World's Fair. Channel 4 in New York, Channel 1 in those days, WNBT TV debuted. Gone with the Wind came out. How many of you like that movie, Gone with the Wind? It came out in 1939. Marian Anderson, the first time she sang in front of the Lincoln Memorial. We're off to see The Wizard, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. You like that movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
When it came out, the critics hated it, and it was a box office disaster. And Lou Gehrig retired on July 4th, 1939. But Europe goes to war, and World War II begins on September 1st with the invasion of Poland by Germany. And it is really chapter 2 of World War I, if you look at it realistically. Years of tension and aggressive expansion by fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. And that ends with the Germans invading Poland at 4:45 in the morning on September 1st. And on September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany. Now, why was this chapter 2 of World War I? Well, it does start almost 21 years later. The decisions that led to war reflected the ambitions and the rivalries and the fears and anxieties that developed in the 2 decades that followed the end of World War I. European powers were willing to go to war to extend or protect what each nation saw in dramatically different ways as matters of vital interest, great power status, international prestige, and national survival. Kaiser Wilhelm, Germany, back in World War I never understood that thing on top of their helmets. Were they rams and just, hitting their heads? But they had that stuff on top of their helmets there. The First World War and its subsequent peace settlements gave rise to new ambitions, rivalries, and tensions. People had high expectations that this post-war peace settlement would create a new world order. Those 3 words have been bandied about for the last 104 years, recently by Xi and Putin from China and Russia, after they were meeting about the situation in Ukraine. In politics, every once in a while, presidential politics, you'll hear some candidate accuse some other candidate of, well, it's going to be a new world order. That was the thought back in 1919. And also, you'll never see the slaughter again. At the right is Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States. Treaty of Versailles, And with him are David Lloyd George of Great Britain, Vittorio Orlando of Italy, George Clemenceau of France, and of course Wilson. And they're the winners. They're the winners. France and England, the United States, Italy in World War I. And with winning comes the spoils. You get to write history, you get to dictate terms. Germany can't do so. But Treaty of Versailles, signed in June of 1919, but it is not officially the end of World War I. Stops World War I. World War I actually stopped on Armistice Day. Remember Armistice Day when that was a holiday? Ask kids today what Armistice Day is. They won't know. It's Veterans Day. That's what it is. November 11th, 1918. And the League of Nations, which the United States never joined, was formed to promote peace and prevent war. Treaty was an uneasy compromise between the victorious allies, Britain, America, France, and Italy. And they wanted to pursue their own interests. Now, Germany was punished. And there were some people in the United States, some people in Britain saying, hey, wait a minute, you've gone too far. You've gone way, way too far. Germany had to give up territory. They had to disarm, and they had to pay for the war's damages. And like I said, there were some people in America, some people in Britain who said, take your foot off the throat, let them breathe. And the treaty would cause immediate outrage and lasting bitterness in Germany. There's an irony from the Treaty of Versailles that Hitler, and the Nazi Party came out actually stronger eventually than they should have been. The Treaty of Versailles put Germany into a pretty good strategic position because Poland and Czechoslovakia and Baltic states were created, and they put a buffer between Germany and Russia, or the Soviet Union by that point, 1919. And Russians and the Germans didn't get along. Fighting among the newly created states weakened them, and their geography, their new borders, made it difficult to defend. And so Germany would end up eventually having small, weak states on its eastern border. Treaty of Lausanne ends World War I in 1923. That's in July of 1923. And the treaty signed off by France and Britain and Italy, Japan, Greece, Romania, and the new Republic of Turkey. So that leads to the next question. Why did Hitler hate Jews? Why did he hate Jews? If you look at this cartoon, that's a German infantryman, I suppose. And here's a Jewish caricature. We don't know if the caricature is a man or a woman, as you can see here, with cleavage. But, and there's the Jewish star, and there's the hook nose, the stereotypical nose. But there's the stab in the back. The stab in the back. The big lie, the big myth that is being perpetrated. During World War I, between 1914 and 1918, Hitler was a soldier in the German army. At the end of the war, he couldn't believe Germany lost. It's not possible. And he wasn't the only one who could get over the defeat of the German Empire. The German military command was spreading a big lie, or the big myth. It said that the army had not lost the war on the battlefield. But without any proof, with no proof at all, the big myth was they lost because they were betrayed. And who betrayed them? It's called the stab in the back. Hitler buys into the myth, buys into the big lie. Jews and communists, well, Trotsky was a communist, but he's the only Jew. Lenin certainly wasn't a communist. Stalin, later on, he's certainly not a Jew. Anyway, he buys into the myth. The Jews and communists had betrayed the country, and because Karl Marx came up with communism, must have been him, except Karl Marx was not Jewish. He was not Jewish. Anyway, they betrayed the country. and they brought a left-wing government to power that just threw in the towel. Whatever France wanted, whatever Italy wanted, whatever the United States wanted, whatever Great Britain wanted, you got it. This is an obscure guy. He's a paper hanger. He's a painter. That's all he is. He can paint 2 rooms, one coat, 2 rooms, 2 rooms, 1 coat in an afternoon. Mel Brooks. Anyway, there he is. Mein Kampf. My struggle. Which struggle? What struggle? He predicted in Mein Kampf that Europe, there would be a general war again, and that would result in the extermination of the Jewish race. This is 1923. It's written in jail. He's jailed after his participation in the beer hall push in Munich, November 9th and 10th, 1923, when the Nazi Party tried to overthrow the German government. Goes to jail. He's released from jail in December 1924. Why did Hitler blame hate Jews? It's the Nazi Party, 1922, Hitler and some of his colleagues. By blaming the Jews for the defeat, Hitler created a stereotypical enemy. 1920s, 1930s, the defeated country was in a major economic crisis. Inflation was thoroughly out of control. And the Nazis proposed this: if we just get rid of all the Jews in Germany, just get rid of all of them, we won't have any problems anymore. And that's what they sold to the German people. The political message and the promise to make Germany economically strong again won Hitler and the Nazi Party the elections in 1932. What was rather interesting, I don't know if you caught it in the last couple of days, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who came from Austria, was talking about almost apologizing for his father supporting Hitler, saying that he bought into the big lie. He bought into the big myth, like a lot of others. And in 1932, certainly the Germans were buying into the big lie, the big myth. But Hitler wasn't he wasn't the guy who was running the country. This guy, Paul von Hindenburg, is running the country until he doesn't. It's January 30th, 1933, and Paul von Hindenburg, who's the president, named Adolf Hitler. He is the leader, or the Führer, of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and or the Nazi Party, and he's now the Chancellor of Germany. And Hitler's plan, like Schwarzenegger talked about the other day when he was talking about his father, was embraced by much of the German population. Do away with politics. Make Germany a powerful, united, one-party state, and start working on getting rid of the Jews in 1933, and the Gypsies or the Romas and political opponents and homosexuals. Get rid of all of them. Well, the outside world didn't worry about what was going on inside of Germany. At least they didn't talk about it. But as part of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, Hitler is supposed, or Germany rather, is not supposed to have a military. Well, Hitler decides to basically poke the bear a little bit in 1935. Luftwaffe, it's coming back. He reforms the German Air Force in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. What's the world reaction?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. I'm going to talk about the 1936 Olympics here at length. And the reason I'm going to do that is my career as a journalist. I worked with Marty Glickman. I knew Sam Stoller. He ran the Milrose Games. And I interviewed Gretel Bergman. Marty Glickman and Sam Stoller did not run in the 1936 Olympics. Marty was the fastest kid in Brooklyn. That's the title of his autobiography, Fastest Kid in Brooklyn. Sam was quiet. Marty wasn't very quiet about all of this. And Gretel Bergman fled Germany in 1933 to train for the 1936 Olympics in London. So it's just a matter of luck that the 3 most prominent Jews who were around in 1936 in the Olympics, I happened to have interaction with. But before I talk about that, I'm going to talk about this guy, Ernest Janke. You probably have never heard of Ernest Janke. He used to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the United States, and he was of German ancestry. And he was also on the International Olympic Committee as a delegate. He was an American delegate. And he's giving reports. This is 1935, November 25th. He's giving reports on what's going on with the Jews, with the Gypsies or the Romas, with political opponents, with gays and lesbians inside of Germany. And he sends a letter on November 25th, 1935, to the International Olympic Committee President, Count André Bellor-Latour. If you deal with the IOC, and I've done that for a long time, you deal with sirs and lords and counts, and it's like a lot of out-of-work royalty ends up with the International Olympic Committee. Anyway, Janke says in the letter, you know what, it may be time to boycott. All the stuff that's going on in Germany, I think maybe the Americans should boycott. And I'm sending you this letter. Well, the letter seems to go unanswered, but in the letter, Janke writes, neither Americans nor representatives of other countries can take part in the games in Nazi Germany without at least acquiescing to the contempt of the Nazis for fair play and their sordid exploitation of the games. Well, Janke is no longer going to be part of this great club called the International Olympic Committee, because he has raised some bad things about Germany. He's come out with it, and he's trying to alert the committee, and by July of 1936, he's gone. His place is taken by a racist, anti-Semitic by the name of Avery Brundage. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever gone to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And you got to really be perceptive to catch this guy in being honored in the Holocaust Museum. This is Judge Jeremiah Mahoney. He was the head of the Amateur Athletic Union of the United States, the people in charge of accepting Olympic invitations and also selecting athletes for the United States Olympic team. On December 8th, 1935, Jeremiah Mahoney goes out and says, we definitely need to boycott the Summer Olympics in Berlin. We cannot send a team there. He's from New York, and he's Catholic. In April 1933, this is his concern, an Aryans-only policy was instituted in all German athletic organizations. Non-Aryans, Jews and individuals with Jewish parents, Romas, Gypsies, systematically excluded from German sports facilities and associations. And I'll give you some examples. Erich Siegel was the light heavyweight boxing champion of the world. He's tossed out of the German Sports Society. Daniel Prenn, he was a world-class tennis player. He's on Germany's Davis Cup team. He is thrown out as well, as is Gretel Bergmann. In the United States, she's known as Margaret Lambert. Margaret Bergmann, Gretel Bergmann, was the best woman athlete in Western Europe, 1933, 34, 35. And it's 1993, and the United States Olympic Committee is holding some sort of gala news conference going into the 1994 Winter Olympics in Norway. And they brought all these former Olympians who have won medals for America, and then there's Gretel Bergmann. And Gretel and I and Mark Schneider, there's an interview. And the way these things worked in those days, I was a radio guy, Marv was a radio guy, and they broke us down to newspapers, radio, and TV. TV guys are over there, newspaper people are here, and me and Marv are the only radio guys there. So we basically were told, go in the corner, who do you want? And I said, well, I want Margaret Lambert. And so we're doing a little small talk beforehand. And we're not allowed to do an official interview until the person in charge, the flak in charge, says you could do the interview. So that's a little small talk. And I said, you know, me, you, and Marv, about 20 years ago, we would not have been allowed in the New York Athletic Club, although the New York Yankees had a blanket membership to the New York Athletic Club, and Mel Allen and Bob Fischel and Larry Allen were able to get in. Anyway, she says, well, better here than in Berlin. So we finally get the go-ahead that we can do the interview. So Marv deferred to me, even though Marv was 25 years older than me, he always deferred to me. So I had just one question, and it was a one-word question. Why? She said, I had to give my people some hope. You don't understand what was going on since Hitler came in. We lost our businesses, we lost our jobs, we lost our housing, we lost the chance at education. We had to wear yellow stars. That's what they were doing to us. I knew I was never going to be in the 1936 Olympics. I knew it. It didn't matter. I had to give our people some hope, or my people some hope. And so I went along with it. I went along until I couldn't go along with it. And 2 weeks before the 1936 Olympics, Gretel Bergman was told, you're not part of this team anymore. She fled to the United States with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's name was Bruno Lambert. He became a physician. They both came to Ellis Island in 1937 with no more than $10 in their pocket. They were sponsored by somebody in Forest Hills. Bruno Lambert went on to become a physician. Margaret Lambert was forgotten until 1980, when the Wingate Institute in Israel wanted to look back at her. And they did, and she became something of a celebrity in 1980, and I got to her in 1933. I think she was about 1993. I think she was 79 years old at the time, and she passed away in Forest Hills in 2017 at the age of 104. There is a movie or documentary that HBO produced back in 2004 called Hitler's Pawn, P-A-W-N. I would, tell Devin to find, or I'll let him know, it's a rather interesting 1 hour where she talks about all that. And she did go back to Germany eventually. Getting back to Mahoney, he said there was no room for discrimination on grounds of race, color, or creed in the Olympics. The AAU voted in 1933 to accept an invitation to compete in Berlin in 1936, what the International Olympic Committee did in 1931, prior to Hitler, was try to get Germany back into the family of nations, and gave the 1936 Winter Olympics to Munich and the Summer Olympics to Berlin. Mahoney continues, provided that Germany pledged that there would be no discrimination against Jewish athletes. If that pledge is not kept, I personally do not see why we should compete. Well, Franklin Roosevelt had no problems. He told the athletes to go ahead, go compete. This is a political problem. This is not an athletic problem. I'm going to get back to Marty Glickman now. I worked with Marty in 1988 at his broadcasting school, and my job was to help aspiring announcers, because I was the old guy then. I was 32 years old, right? Right? So anyway, I was there to help out in all that. And Marty and I would talk occasionally, and he hated Avery Brundage. And one day I said to Marty, I said, did you agree with Roosevelt? He said, I sure did. He said, see, me and Sam, two New York Jews, we were going to go into Berlin, we were going to go into that stadium, and in the 4x100 meter relay, which was our event, we were going to win that gold medal, we were going to go onto the podium with the gold medals, and then we were going to stick that gold medal into the Fuhrer's face, saying, New York Jews aren't going to put up with you. Well, the day before the race, Avery Brundage, even though he wasn't there, and the coach, Dean Cromwell, Dean Cromwell told Marty and Sam, well, we want our faster runners out there, and you're going to be, we're not using it. Oddly enough, or ironically enough, Marty was replaced by Jesse Owens, who ended up winning the gold medals and disproving Hitler's Aryan superiority. But for the first time in the modern Olympic Games, and it wasn't that modern at that point, it started again in 1896. People in Europe and the United States called for a boycott of the Olympics, and later the term is used, human rights abusers or abuses. So this is the stadium that Marty did go into. He was there, but he didn't race. And you can see, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. Brundage had assurances from Hitler. All was good. Certain Jews must understand they cannot use these games as a weapon in their boycott against the Nazis, said Avery Brundage, who labeled an anti-Olympic campaign a Jewish communist conspiracy. Well, let's see, Janke, he wasn't Jewish. Mahoney's not Jewish. Two of the people that went around the country with Jeremiah Mahoney, the New York governor, Al Smith, he was Catholic, he wasn't Jewish. James Curley, he's the governor of Massachusetts. He's not Jewish, he's Catholic as well. Some American newspapers called Avery Brundage a Nazi stooge. Howard Cosell, who lived down the street here in Stamford for a long time, said that Avery Brundage came of age during the time of William of Orange. I was in Bruges one day. I was in Delft one day in the Netherlands, and we went to see William of Orange's dungeon. And there's a place called William of Orange Cafe, which I took a picture of, sent to Cosell's grandkids, who laughed and said, "You certainly knew Poppy, didn't you?" Nazi stooge, it's probably the nicest thing you could say about Avery Brundage. The games itself, there they are. 1936, the Nazi regime tried to camouflage its racist, violent policies as it hosted these Olympics. Most anti-Jewish signs were temporarily removed. Newspapers toned down their harsh rhetoric, all an illusion. This is Berlin Games, to be presented to foreign spectators and journalists with a false image of a peaceful, tolerant Germany. You know, the kind of Germany with Hitler with a song in his heart. Go ahead.
My apologies, I'm enjoying this so much, but I'm late for a meeting.
That's okay.
So I'll catch you the next time.
Yeah, we'll be here next week. We're
All right,
talking
great.
about Lucille Ball next week,
excellent.
and the anniversary, it's going to be the 66th anniversary of the
Sure.
final Lucy show, and that was May 6, 1957. So we're going to talk all about
I
that
agree.
next week.
Thank you.
Anyway, so Adolf Hitler has a propaganda victory. He has a win. Nobody boycotted the Olympics. 49 nations sent teams to Germany. They legitimized the Hitler regime, both in the eyes of the world and also the German domestic audience. So nobody lifts a finger except for Mahoney and Janke. That's it. Nobody else lifts a finger. Hitler becomes more emboldened, and he's continuing in 1938 to come very, very emboldened. Kristallnacht, November 9th, November 10th, 1938, coincidentally, 16 years after he's arrested. Nazi leaders unleash a series of pogroms against Jewish population, the remaining Jewish population in Germany, because in 1937 a number got out, and recently incorporated territories. It's called Kristallnacht, the Night of the Broken Glass, because shattered glass littered the streets after vandalism and destruction of Jewish-owned businesses, synagogues, and homes. That is the last act. But there is more prior to that, 1938, that makes him emboldened, or emboldens him. This is Neville Chamberlain, the great appeaser. And Neville Chamberlain, his job is to try to prevent war in Europe. He's Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and he's best known for his role in the 1938 Munich Agreement, which gave Hitler parts of Czechoslovakia. Hitler had taken pieces of Austria in 1938 as well. Chamberlain flies to Berlin. It's September 15th, and he's there in an attempt to secure the peace. Oh, by the way, Adolf, you can have that piece of Czechoslovakia you want. Oh, don't worry about the Czechoslovakians. They don't, well, don't worry about that. Or Czechoslovakians say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? What are you doing? You didn't tell us this is going to go on. Why are you taking this away from us? Well, they were told, just keep quiet. And you know what? If you try to do anything, we're not going to help you. So you might as well just take it. They did. The deal's done September 30th. Chamberlain, believing he had averted war, proclaimed peace for our time to a crowd upon his arrival in England. By 1939, there is no stopping Adolf Hitler, and it is time for the final solution. The final solution for the Jews. That is Hermann Göring. On January 24th, Göring, who is the second in command as Führer of the German Reich and people, he authorizes the security police and the SD chief, Reinhard Heydrich, to coordinate solutions for the forced immigration of Jews from the greater German Reich and to establish a central office for Jewish immigration in Berlin. Sounds all good, right? We'll just exile them. We'll just get rid of them. We'll just exile them. We'll find places. Except they don't. They cannot find places. Hitler, a couple days later, 1939, January 30th, declares that in the event of another world war, he intended to hold international finance Jewry responsible. The result would not be the Bolshevization of the earth with that the victory of the Jewry, but rather the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. And Hitler's on the march, or as Mel Brooks would say, Hitler on tour. March 14th, under German pressure, Slovakia declares its independence from the Czechoslovak state. March 15th, Hitler decides, we want the rest of Czechoslovakia, so let's just go in there. We're going to occupy the Czech provinces and establish the protectorate of Bohemia and Bavaria. Meanwhile, by the end of April, England is like, what's going on? We better do something. Well, nobody had stopped Hitler in over 6 years by this point. So on April 27th, Britain decides it better prepare for war. And they're starting to draft young men for military training. It's a departure. Britain is preparing for war. So is Adolf Hitler. Hey, he goes and finds his buddy, Benito Mussolini in Italy. Hey, Benito, man, you gonna join us? Yeah, we're gonna join us. Pact of Steel, Pact of Friendship and Alliance between Germany and Italy. Military political agreement, signed on May 22nd. Now, remember when I said nobody wanted the Jews? Well, here's a prime example. How many of you know about the ship, the St. Louis? You know about it. Okay, you're the only one. Well, the St. Louis is leaving Hamburg, Germany. It is May 13th, and they're headed to Cuba, or they think they're headed to Cuba. Between May 13th and June 17th, 900 refugees, most of them Jews, are aboard the ship, the St. Louis. Most of them are Jewish, and they're headed to Cuba. They are hoping to receive visas into the United States, but Cuba says no. The United States says no. They're going back to Europe. The United States and Canada, or Britain, Canada was kind of a quasi-country, but still under the thumb of England, were unwilling to admit the passengers. The St. Louis passengers were finally permitted to land in Western Europe, Belgium, rather than return to Nazi Germany. 254 of those passengers would be killed during the Holocaust. And here's the ship being rejected in one of the ports. The U.S. government didn't allow the passengers to land. They didn't have U.S. immigration visas, not past the security screening. 1939, Franklin Roosevelt, knowing there's a growing isolationism in the United States, decided to ignore the plight of the passengers on the ship. Finally, here they are in Belgium getting off the ship. All of this is because of the 1924 Immigration Act. It was called the Johnson-Reed Act, 2 senators, and it limited the number of immigrants who could be admitted to the United States each year. The percentage of visas available to individuals from the British Isles and Western Europe increased. But newer immigration from other areas like Southern and Eastern Europe was limited, meaning that Italians and Greeks and Czechs and all those others from Eastern Europe, including the Jews, only a few visas are available for them. And here's another thing. okay, you passed this thing in 1924, you'd say, okay, let's rely on the 1920 census. No. They go back to 1890 before Ellis Island brings in, or all these people get to Ellis Islands. Why 1890? Well, simple, because you could get the Scandinavians and the English and the Western Europeans in, because we don't want any of those people from Eastern Europe. It's Pier 21 in Halifax. Speak on cruise ships, and this is where, when you get to Halifax in Nova Scotia, this is where you are, Pier 21. 1930 and 1931, the Canadian government, basically taking orders from the Brits, responded to the Great Depression by applying severe restrictions to entry. New rules limited British and American subjects, or agriculture, people with money, certain classes of workers, and immediate family and Canadian residents. That's it. That's all they took. Meanwhile, there's something called the German-American Bund. And I've been doing aspects of this talk for 25 years. And it used to be when I was in West Orange, New Jersey, in that area, people would tell me, they all were from Newark and they just moved like 8-9 miles away. People would tell me, well, you know, in the Oranges and other places in northern New Jersey, the Bund was there. Yaplank, Long Island, was another place. A woman told me that when she used to go to the Borscht Belt, the Jewish Alps, right, in Monticello in 1939, there was a German Bund Club. A guy who was giving a talk, and he told me he grew up in Texas, and he said in Central Texas there was German-American Bund. So they were all over the place. Glen Rock was the other place in New Jersey. Anyway, there you go. Silver Shirts. It was an organization of ethnic Germans living in the United States, pro-Nazi stance. The Bund program included anti-Semitism, strong anti-communist sentiments, and the demand that the United States remain neutral in the approaching European conflict. Let's go to a garden party. This is the poster. Pro-American rally by ethnic Germans. Mass demonstration for true Americanism. Again, ethnic Germans. Madison Square Garden, February 20th, 1939. 20,000 Nazis packed Madison Square Garden, 8th Avenue and 52nd Street. But the Bund headquarters was in Yorkville, like 2nd Avenue and 83rd Street in Manhattan. These guys would get into battles in the streets with Jewish war veterans. But the February 20th rally was to proclaim the rights of white Gentiles, the true patriots. Now, I always thought the true patriots were John Hancock and Ben Franklin and George Washington and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, none of whom were Germans. In fact, the only German that was really involved in any kind of leadership was a guy by the name of von Steuben. And he was thrown out of Germany because he was gay. And they picked him up, the Americans, because they were looking for anybody who was qualified and good enough to lead the troops. So February 20th, they have this rally for the true patriots. And whenever Roosevelt's name was mentioned, he was booed, and constantly, all night long, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. The Bund was led by this guy, Fritz Kuhn. A survey of Americans said, yeah, he was the leading anti-Semite in the United States. How many people were part of the Bund? Maybe 25,000 were due-paying members, but there were 8,000 stormtroopers. But the Roosevelt administration decided to, let's take a closer look at this. And they do. The Bund came under investigation. The financial records were seized, and the government wanted to know what happened to this. $14,000 is unaccounted for. What happened? Well, they found out that Kuhn spent the money on his mistress and other personal expenses. He is convicted of embezzlement in December 1939 and sentenced to Sing Sing. This is the father of hate radio in the United States, the absolute father of hate radio. His name, Father Charles Coughlin. He's not even an American. He's from Hamilton, Ontario. He's a Catholic priest, and he is on radio every Sunday sprouting hate. He was in Royal Oak, Michigan. I do Zoom talks for the library in Royal Oak, Michigan, so this one will be one of them. It'll be interesting. And he was a radio celebrity. He was a celebrity, a big-time celebrity. Donald Fear, who used to run the Major League Baseball Players Association, who we're friendly. And this is in 1991 actually it is. And we're sitting in Winter Haven, Florida. And he just looks at me and says, you know, Americans dote on celebrity. And they do. His sermons aired on Sunday. It featured populist talk, anti-communist talk, and anti-Semitic claims. The peak of his popularity, he had as many as 40 million devoted weekly listeners. In a country of 130 million, and how many of them are children? So he had a big following. He linked Jews to the creation and spread of communism. He said he hated communism. He also frequently utilized literary and religious references to spread anti-Semitic stereotypes. And he put out a magazine. It's called Social Justice. It came out in 1936. Founded in 1936 by Father Coughlin. And here he is. The Jewish Question by Dr. J.S. Barnes. Although he published the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's a hoax. That was a hoax. I think I've heard that word before somewhere. I'm not sure. Anyway, it was an anti-Semitic pamphlet that said, hey, Jews are sitting around and yeah, there's a conspiracy and they're going to control the world. That was in multiple issues of social justice. But he wasn't the first guy in that neighborhood that sprouted that. In Dearborn, there was Henry Ford. And it's actually quite interesting going to the Henry Ford Museum now because it's a civil rights museum along with a car museum, believe it or not, because his heirs have tried to somehow clean up his name. He bought the newspaper called the Dearborn Independent in 1919. And one of the things he wrote, the Jew is a race that has no civilization to point to, no aspiring religion, no great achievement in any realm. And that was, Dearborn Independent was distributed at Ford dealerships. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was a fake. It was fake news. Forgery that came from Russia, translated into English. It claimed the existence of an international Jewish conspiracy, a group of Jews that got together and, hey, this is how the world's going to run. 1931, Adolf Hitler said, I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration. And there is Father Coughlin. After the war begins in September, he says to his followers, make sure that 1924 Immigration Act stays as is. In fact, tighten it up if you can. And don't get involved in the war with Germany. You know why? Because Hitler's going to win. Stalin and Hitler cook a deal in August of 1939 that would directly lead to the start of World War II. It's August 23rd, the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, and it has a secret protocol in there. And basically, Stalin said, Adolf, you want Poland? Here it is. We're not going to bother. Europe is being sliced into two, the Soviet sphere and the German sphere. Meanwhile, my best buddy here, Benito, he tells Hitler, hey, if you get in the war, count me out. Count me out. We're not getting in the war. Thanks for the invitation, but we're not doing it. In response to the Nazi-Soviet pact, Britain and Poland entered into a formal military alliance on August 25th. Now, Brits are still pushing for peace, and they're trying, and Italy says we're not involved. Hitler told the Brits, we'll take care of you, don't worry about it, we'll take care of you. But we have to solve the crisis in Poland. What crisis in Poland? There's no crisis in Poland. Oh, the 3 million Jews. That's the crisis in Poland. August 29th, Hitler presented the British ambassador, Sir Neville Henderson, with a set of conditions which included give us the Danzig and the corridor and we're all cool. The German invasion of Poland starts on September 1st at 4:45 in the morning. The war has started. Neville Chamberlain goes on the BBC to tell all of the citizens of the United Kingdom, we're off to war. We tried to get them out of Poland by 11 o'clock this morning. They didn't do it, so we're at war with Germany again. And Mr. Chamberlain goes to war. Germany represented a direct threat to security of not only Britain, but the empire. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, lots of Africa, India. That was a threat. Accepting the German domination of Europe would have grave implications for British status and survival. Britain went to war in 1939 to defend the balance of power in Europe and safeguard Britain's position in the world. Meanwhile, across the pond, this is Times Square. And for some people of a certain age, you know it's Times Square because it's Bonds. Remember Bonds, the clothing store? You remember Bonds? There it is. And here are a bunch of Americans. Myrna Loy is in some movie here. These are Americans against the war. Do not get involved in the European war. Now, American isolation. Neutrality Act, 1935, prohibited exporting arms and ammunition to any foreign nation at war. 1937, there's a new Neutrality Act which prohibited Americans from traveling on ships owned by any belligerent nation and declared that American-owned ships could not carry any arms intended for war zones. Roosevelt's beginning to figure out how he could get around that in 1939. 1938, 20 years after World War I ended, Armistice Day, November 11th, 1918, 70% of Americans said that the United States should never have been involved in World War I. Germany does invade Poland on September 1st. War is declared. England and France on Germany and Italy on September 3rd, and America is unmoved. The war in Europe, not yet called the Second War, is simply known as the emergency. Americans who were polled immediately after the war overwhelmingly hoped for the defeat of Germany, but 90% of those polled said, let's not get involved here. The majority didn't want to join the fight, even if Nazi Germany defeated Great Britain and France. And a defeat of Great Britain would mean that the Nazis would have been north of the border, or in Detroit's case, south of the border, in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Meanwhile, there's something else going on. Something else in the Pacific. Japan invades China. Japan invades China, and that's Chiang Kai-shek. He is the leader of mainland China. Roosevelt's got his eye on that. This war started in 1937. China began to resist. Japan had started in 1931 to have more influence in the territory. Roosevelt's very concerned about what Japan is doing in 1939. Meanwhile, George Elser wanted to kill Adolf Hitler. It's November 8th. It's the 16th anniversary of Hitler's Beer Hall Putsch. The bomb explodes just after Hitler finished giving a speech. He was unharmed. 12 minutes after Hitler leaves the hall, the bomb explodes. It was in a pillar behind the speaker's podium. Hope there's nothing back there. 7 people were killed and 63 wounded. There's a third war going on. This is the Soviets and the Finns. That starts on November 30th. 500,000 troops go into Finland because the Soviets wanted to set up military bases in Finland. The fourth war that's going on is the Spanish Civil War, but that's coming to an end. That had started in July 1936. A rebel coup took place against the elected Republicans by the military-supported nationalists. The nationalists were backed by Italy and Germany. The Republicans had the Soviet Union support. The end is coming. The country was split in two by the opposing sides. 1937, the Nationalists gained control of many of the northern provinces. The Nationalists kept pushing the Republicans north, and they would eventually flee to France by the end of 1938. And the end is near. Francisco Franco was appointed the head of the Nationalist Army and Chief of State in 1936. By November 1938, the National forces made it outside of Madrid and began a siege of the capital. On March 28th, the Nationalists captured Madrid. Franco announced the Nationalist victory on April 1st. Many atrocities committed, 500,000 were killed, another 500,000 fled. This is not a war, or it's an ongoing war, depending on your point of view. It's the White Paper of 1936. There was an Arab revolt in Palestine. The White Paper of 1939 was a policy paper issued by the British government in response to the 1936 to 39 Arab revolt in Palestine. Again, remember going back to nobody wanted the Jews. Well, the Brits decided, you know what? We're going to limit, or we're going to put quotas on immigrants going into Palestine if they're Jewish. We're going to have one single state, and the Arabs are going to run it, and the Jews are going to get some status as a minority. The Germans are coming close, people think, to getting a bomb. At least the West was concerned about that. And this guy, Albert Einstein, along with Leo Szilard, would tell Franklin Roosevelt about it. There was an announcement in 1939 that the German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered fission, and that prompted fears that Germany could develop an atomic bomb. Leo Szilard contacts other scientists, Edward Teller and Eugene Wigner. What are we going to do? First thing they said, well, let's get Albert Einstein to sound the alarms. He'd be the perfect person to do that. Szilard would speak with Alexander Sachs, who was a friend of Roosevelt, and Sachs said, write a letter to FDR, make sure Einstein is involved. Well, they do, and Szilard was taken seriously by Roosevelt and would establish a uranium committee which could eventually come up with an atomic bomb. Hollywood begins to take notice. Hollywood was on the fence in terms of what to do. Most of the movie studios run by Jews. And the reason why is there was money to be made in Europe. It's a lucrative market. But by 1939, that changes a little bit. Confessions of a Nazi Spy starring Emmanuel Goldberg, Edward G. Robinson, made by the Warner Brothers and directed by Anatole Litvak. It's a spy political thriller. It was the first anti-Nazi film to be produced by a major Hollywood studio, released in May, several months before the beginning of World War II. But there were some nice things that happened in 1939, like the New York World's Fair. Anybody here, the latecomers who came in at the World's Fair? Well,
yeah, the Trilon and the Paris.
Yeah, there they are, and they were melted down for the war effort afterwards. But you were there?
Yep.
Yeah, did you enjoy it?
I was a kid. I was 9 years old.
So you must have had a good time. Did you see the new TV that was in the middle of the pavilion? There was one guy about 5 years ago who told me that he was pulled out of the line. He was about 12 years old. And he's supposed to, where are you taking? Well, we're taking him back here. You can come here too. There's a studio set up there. And the mother was satisfied. And she went back to the line. And all of a sudden, look at he's on TV. He's on TV. So kids got on TV back then. The theme of the fair, Building the World of Tomorrow, opened on April 30th, 150th anniversary of the inauguration of George Washington in New York City, the nation's capital, Federal Hall, back in 1789. And Franklin Roosevelt's the first guy on TV. There were 20 TVs set up all around the World's Fair, and people watch, or rather 200 TVs, people watched from 5 to a TV because it was only that big, and he gives his first ever presidential speech on TV. And wouldn't be the last, of course. And here's that little TV that people went in and they were able to watch TV. In the case of that guy, his mother and father got to watch him on TV. RCA introduced television to the American public at the World's Fair. Before the fair, they published a brochure for their dealers to explain television. NBC would start regular programming on W2XBS or WNBT, Channel 1, right after the fair. By the way, the people who perfected TV, the Nazis. They were going to use it for propaganda purposes in 1935. You obviously won't remember this, but you probably got this brochure, or your family got this brochure, telling you how great TV was going to be, and you were never going to leave your living room because you could watch baseball, boxing, award shows, the symphony, political debates, all in your living room. All you have to do is spend $200 to $1,600 to buy a TV, which now would be $5,000 to $40,000 for a TV. And I'm taking you all back to May 19th, 1939. You're all 9 years old again, and you're all staying home from school, and you all have TVs, and you're staying home from school because your parents say, hey, we heard there's going to be a cartoon on. It's going to be a Walt Disney cartoon, and we want you to watch it. We want you to watch it. Besides, school year is almost over, and you all have TVs. Now, Disney characters. Who do you want to see? Do you want to see Mickey Mouse? Do you want to see Minnie Mouse? Do you want to see Donald Duck? You want to see Daisy Duck? You want to see Goofy or Pluto? Who do you want to see? Any of them? Any of those characters? Somebody's got to answer because you're going to ruin my punchline. But if you don't answer, which one do you want to see?
Donald Duck.
You want to see Donald Duck? Hey, you want to see Donald Duck? But you got him. Gus Goose. Anybody remember Gus Goose?
No.
No, he was put on the shelf. He was a slob. His food flew all over the place. He was just a slob, and it didn't really work out for Gus Goose. But and he's also Donald Duck's cousin, just in case you wanted to know. But the first cartoon, Walt Disney cartoon, Donald's Cousin Gus, is on W2XBS on May 19th. Walt Disney was on the ground floor in TV in both the United States and in England. August 26th, the first baseball games, a doubleheader between the Cincinnati Reds and Brooklyn Dodgers. Any old Dodger fans here? Oh, good. I can say Walter O'Malley without worrying about that. Doubleheader between the Cincinnati Reds and the Brooklyn Dodgers in Ebbets Field in Brooklyn. As the cover of my football book, this is the Brooklyn Dodgers National Football League team. That's Benny Feathers, and it's kind of a little bit unnecessary roughness. Guy's trying, that had to hurt, but he's running with the football. This is Pittsburgh. This is a clear day in Pittsburgh. Between the smoke from the steel mills and the coal mines, that's a clear day in Pittsburgh, and the referee looks like he's about ready to go golfing, doesn't he? So, but the National Football League was on October 22nd and televised to about 1,000 TV sets in the New York area. Gone with the Wind was released. The National Football League, as I said, Gone with the Wind. It was adapted from Margaret Mitchell's novel from 1936, Gone with the Wind. Set in the American South against the backdrop of American Civil War and Reconstruction, the film tells the story of Scarlett O'Hara, the daughter of a Georgia plantation owner, following her romantic pursuit of Ashley Wilkes and married to his cousin, who was married to his cousin, Melanie Hamilton, and frankly, I don't give a damn, Red Butler. But what people in 1939, at least white people didn't know in 1939, was that Gone with the Wind was not accepted by the African American community. There were protests. You'd be sweet too under a whip. Gone with the Wind hangs the free Negro. And the film was criticized by black commentators, then, still to this day, for whitewashing the issue of slavery. But the reason why most people didn't know, or the white community didn't know, about the black community protesting the movie was that the papers were owned by people like William Randolph Hearst and Colonel McCormick, who had the Chicago Tribune and other newspapers, and they didn't report about the criticisms. Hattie McDaniel would win an Academy Award for her portrayal. Best Actress, Supporting Actress role in Gone with the Wind, but she couldn't attend the opening of Gone with the Wind on December 15th at the Lowe's Grand Theater on Peachtree Street in Atlanta because of Jim Crow or segregation laws.
Oh,
Marian Anderson. You know what Marian Anderson is here?
God. Singer,
Opera singer.
famous.
Opera. Do you know who Marian Anderson is?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking the younger people. You don't know? I'm going to give you a history lesson right now. A big history lesson. It's Easter Sunday, and Marian Anderson would give a free concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial because she was denied the opportunity to do so at Washington, D.C.'s Constitutional Hall. Why? She's African American. And Constitutional Hall, which was run by the Daughters of the American Revolution, had a whites-only policy. They explained the rules governing the use of Constitution Hall are in accordance with the policy of theaters, auditoriums, hotels, and public schools of Washington, D.C. Therefore, no concert. But Marian Anderson has an ally and a big fan in Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady of the United States, and also the most respected woman in the United States in the 1930s. And she has a newspaper column called My Day. And she said, I'm giving up my membership in the Daughters of the American Revolution to protest its segregational stance. Well, it's back to square one. We still want to give that concert on Easter Sunday. But what are we going to do? Well, let's do it in front. We'll do it in front of Constitution Hall. But in March of Grandeur, I only have about 6 more minutes if you want to stay to the end. So anyway, there's a bigger idea. It's endorsed by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And her manager, Sol York. Let's see if we could sing in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So she has to meet with Harold Ickes. And Harold Ickes is the head of the Department of the Interior, Secretary of the Interior, and this is what he says. I will love this. I'll love this. I want to do it. But I better check with the boss, Franklin Roosevelt, who was staying out of Racial Matters now he's in his 6th year of the presidency, because he does not want to lose the South. It's solidly Democrat, and he needs electoral votes. But he may not be running for re-election in 1940, so he gives the thumbs up. She sings. It's 9 o'clock in the afternoon, April 9th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. 75,000 people are there. She sings America, Ave Maria, to commemorate Easter, then a few black spirituals. She told the audience, I am so overwhelmed today I cannot express myself. You don't know what you've done for me. We're off to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which was almost cut out of the movie. Almost cut out of the movie. When it came out, Oz was not commercially successful, and the critics hated it. Judy Garland did win an Oscar for her portrayal as Dorothy. Yip Harburg, who wrote one of my favorite songs, Brother Can You Spare a Dime, the lyrics, and Harold Arlen won Oscars for Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Film lost money at the box office. It was dismissed by critics. No trace of imagination. Now let me ask you something. All of you who've watched The Wizard of Oz, do you need an imagination to watch The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
According to the New Yorker, no trace of imagination, good taste or integrity, filled with freak characters, according to the New Republic. Lou Gehrig says goodbye on July 4th, 1939. It's Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day, and he utters the famous words at home plate at the ceremony. For the past 2 weeks, you've been reading about a bad break, yet today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. But did he really say it? I'll come back to that in about 4 minutes. This is the entrance to USS